Silent Hill 2. What can I say about this game that wasn't said already? Probably nothing, but you won't stop me. I'm scheduling this video to release on my birthday. Are you gonna be so cruel as to criticize the birthday boy? Let's start off with some generalities, in case you missed this game and its cultural impact until now. First released in 2001 for the PlayStation 2, Silent Hill 2 is a survival horror game centering around James Sunderland, an unassuming man somewhere in his 20s or 30s, summoned to the titular town of Silent Hill by a letter from his wife. It's a resort placed next to a scenic lake, and they spent a wonderful holiday there some time ago, and James promised they would visit it again. Only issue is, Mary, his wife, died a few years ago.
In my restless dreams, I see that town, Silent Hill. You promised you'd take me there again someday, but you never did. Well, I'm alone there now, in our special place, waiting for you.
Despite the fact that something is very clearly off about the entire situation, James drives into the town, compelled by the need to know what the heck is going on. Silent Hill itself seems desolate, with fog-covered streets completely empty, if not for some humanoid beings from the uncanniest of valleys roaming the streets and the buildings. Aside from James, there are only 4 recognizably human people left in town. Eddie, a man-child you first encounter puking his heart out. Angela, a young woman who seems just as lost as James and looking for her mother. Laura, a child who, as all children, is a terrible human being. And Maria, a woman that looks and sounds just like Mary despite being a completely different person. Silent Hill 2, despite being nominally a sequel, has little to do with the first game in the series aside from its titular location. The original PlayStation 1 game dealt with cults, drugs, and overtly supernatural happenings. These elements are still present in the background, but none of the key characters or concepts return. All that matters is that Silent Hill is a remote, fucked up little town with a history of, let's say, non-standard religious and government practices. The original is definitely a good game that I recommend playing, but Silent Hill 2 is a genre-defining masterpiece that pretty much created the notion of what psychological horror means in the video game landscape. And like with all masterpieces, its imitators took seemingly nothing but the wrong lessons from it, including some of the later entries in its own series. But we'll get to that hang-up in a bit. If you'd like to experience the game for yourself, the optimal way to do so today would be the Silent Hill 2 Enhanced Edition for PC. A fun patch that makes the game playable on modern systems, provides widescreen support, upscaled fonts, all the good stuff. I'll link the website for it in the description. The game is about 10 to 15 hours long, and I wouldn't say it's particularly challenging on a gameplay level, especially as that version of the game allows you to save at any moment. I do recommend going in as blind as possible, though be advised, it is a dark horror game, dealing with imagery of things like suicide and sexual abuse. When I first played the game as a teenage boy, it was upsetting and thought-provoking. Having experienced it again as an adult, it is absolutely terrifying on a level so visceral that I genuinely believe it's a tale that transcends time, culture and language. Which is to say, no matter who you are, when you are, and what language the game was translated to, its core will remain just as powerful. But to get to that core in a medium that is not the game itself will take some digging. The first bite of the shovel is the name of the genre itself. Psychological horror. As with all genres, this is but a shorthand label meant to give the audience a point to grab onto, a point of reference of how to interact with the work itself. But at the same time, it is indicative of what parts of said work resonate with the player the most. It's not a shooter because you can grab a gun. It's not a beat-em-up because you swing a metal pipe at the mannequin-esque creatures. It's a psychological horror. Psychology itself is a field of study as ancient as humanity itself, even if it was one of the few that transitioned from philosophical ponderings into positivist peer-reviewed field of academics. In its most direct sense, the word means study of the soul, psyche and logia, the spirit and the knowing. On some level, every piece of horror, hell, every work of art is psychological in nature, using quirks and facets of the way that we perceive the world to convey its message. Be it through narrative shorthands, visual tricks of perspective, or harmonious melodies, art as we widely understand it is a uniquely human creation, so it is inseparable from the human soul. So the need to underline that aspect, to outright state that this is a psychological horror, is a statement. It's not using psychology to make you scared. Every work of fiction does or attempts to do that on some level. Silent Hill 2 is horror derived from psychology, from obtaining knowledge about your own soul and inner workings. Just like survival horror makes the logistics of keeping yourself alive the element that contextualizes the game's events as scary. It's not about analyzing James's mind, it's about using his actions as a mirror for the player to view themselves in, be it through empathy or gameplay projection of self onto the character. For this to work, the story and its characters need to be relatable, which is to say, simple. It cannot be a tale of larger-than-life figures with numerous life events, as each of those is a step away from making the characters as relatable for the audience as possible. But at the same time, James Sunderland would not be so easy for me to recall by name if he was a self-insertable blank slate like escapist fantasy protagonist number 5. James loves his wife dearly, enough to walk straight into hell on earth without ever considering walking back. That's the full extent of his spoken motivation, and it is all that is needed to establish a link between him and the audience. Even if the details might differ, you might be asexual or not into women or not a man like James, but I think everyone has a bond in their life strong enough to warrant walking into Silent Hill. That if they disappeared from your life and suddenly beckoned you into hell with a letter, you would walk into it just because the notion of leaving that stone unturned would be unbearable, even if it is just a friend. But it is in the unspoken, in the physical actions that the horror shows itself. James shoving his hand down filthy toilets without a second thought, Angela staring into her reflection on the surface of a kitchen knife, Laura's vigor in movement showing how unaware she is of the terrors surrounding her that make you, as a player, make your steps carefully and try to be wary of your surroundings at all times. And again, that physicality is, if not universal, then universally understood, conveys the emotions and reflects the inner turmoils of its characters back at the player. Right, so speaking of actually taking actions in the game world, let's talk about the gameplay. On paper, it's really nothing spectacular. You see a creepy Crowley, so you swing a bat at it or shoot it until it doesn't move anymore. Melee combat is unwieldy and awkward, needing a lot of deliberation in swings, as James is not a hardened veteran, he's just a guy. His swings are wide and slow, he digs his heels into the ground when making them unless you also tell him to move at the same time. And of course, guns have limited ammunition, making you think twice before wasting it on anything other than a boss fight. The twist to the combat is that you need to get up close to the enemy and stomp it on the ground to make sure that it stays down. Otherwise they might get back. Oh, sweet Jesus! The secret ingredient pulling these simple combat mechanics together is the town of Silent Hill itself. Many things have been said about the fog-clad settlement over the years by many reviewers, analysts and a dime a dozen video makers like myself, so I might repeat some common sentiments, but I also don't fully agree with them. First of all, I've often seen the logic of the town being described as dreamlike, making a modicum of sense on the surface but turning bizarre and ruled by emotions more than hard logic on further scrutiny. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm the type of person that never remembers his own dreams unless they're about sex, so I never particularly liked that adjective. But I can certainly put a similar sentiment in my own words. Silent Hill is familiar, yet alien. Like walking down a street you know so well that your brain runs on autopilot, and you only realize how far you walked when something out of the ordinary happens. And the further you go, the less familiar it becomes. Or worse, it becomes familiar in all the wrong ways. Which is a fancy schmancy way of saying that all these spaces feel real, but just slightly off. The apartment building corridors are just a tad too long and narrow. The streets just eerily empty enough. It was oftentimes said that the town itself feels like a character, just fucking with you. Be it by dangling the thing you need in front of your face, making you take labyrinthian routes to go from one room to another, or just by straight up addressing you directly over a PA system.
And our lucky, or should I say unlucky challenger today,
Of course, this is all game design, but the illusion is sold very well, especially as familiar streets end and nightmare tunnels of symbolism begin. But to get into those is to get into spoilers. Which is to say, hey, if you haven't experienced this game for yourself, now is a good time to skip to the timestamp visible on the screen. Go take a bus to Silent Hill, it's a scenic place. I'm sure you'll come back with nothing but good memories. Go, they're leaving without you. Do you really want to miss out on your vacation? Yeah, James is full of shit. Not consciously, not at first at least, but still. Mary has not been dead for years. The day that she died in James's mind is the day when she became sick, which is pretty fucked up. She only died recently, by his hand. Watching his wife suffer, James decided to end it by suffocating her with a pillow. And then he felt relief. And that instantly transformed into immense guilt, which drove him into town with Mary's corpse implicitly in his car's trunk, set to die with her, only for the fog of Silent Hill to cover his train of thought and make him think he came in there to find her. The letter that drove him there slowly disintegrates as you get closer to the truth. The writing becomes blank, then it's just the empty envelope, then it just disappears from the inventory completely. But everything in Silent Hill is about Mary and his suicidal drive to end his life like he ended hers. It's seen in his actions, like putting his hand into the vilest of places without second thought, jumping into a grave marked as his, or taking just a second too long when pulling a noose down for a puzzle, slightly stretching his neck upwards, as if he was considering just using it for himself in that moment. All monsters are either feminine in form or sickly and disfigured, vomiting on him as a form of attack. You outright find the flashlight in the game on a mannequin dressed in Mary's clothes, and the moment you take it and the light is switched off, when the light associated with Mary disappears, one of the monsters crawls from behind it. And stalking after James is the iconic Pyramid Head, the executioner from the town's shadowy history, his own sense of guilt and desire for punishment given form. First seen not in a cutscene, but in gameplay, as you walk back down a corridor you traversed a few times prior, just standing there. It's such an effective moment. Going through the routine of gameplay, you don't have your guard up as you would if a cutscene started after entering a room. It's you and him, separated by iron bars. And you just know in your gut that if the barrier wasn't there, the situation would be much more dire for James. Pyramid Head is one of these elements that often get mentioned in how Silent Hill lost its way later on in the series. The design of the monster was so iconic that it got reused several times, including the horrible 3D movie that is an adaptation of Silent Hill 3. On one hand, I see where the idea came from. Even setting aside cynical marketing spiels about recognizability and appeal, Pyramid Head is an image projected by Silent Hill, not James's mind. That of an executioner from the town's history. So as long as there is guilt that needs punishing, there is going to be a Pyramid Head. But, on the other hand, James's guilty conscience is the core of his story. It's hard to imagine the same symbol used in any way that is as strong without retreading the same path in later installments. The linchpin of the entire emotional journey here, I think, is how mundane James's guilt is. It's not tied to the supernatural elements of the town. They stem from it, as well as the sins of the other adults in the town, but they are all down to earth and entirely mundane. And that is what makes Silent Hill 2D, in my humble opinion, most terrifying piece of fiction I ever got my hands on. Amnesia: The Dark Descent is a fine-ish horror game, but the core plot of it is tied to its supernatural elements, putting a step of separation between the feelings of the player character and the audience. Speaking of other characters, Laura can be easily summed up as an innocent child, completely unaware of the horrors of Silent Hill, as she is not tormented by any sense of guilt. There is a certain cruelty to her innocence, but again, that's because she's a child, and kids are cruel, Jack! Then we have Eddie, a man ridiculed by others for so long that he snaps and shoots a dog to death and its owner in the leg. As he stays in Silent Hill, he spirals further down, completely rejecting any sense of remorse and lashing out at any perceived insult, including James telling him that you can't just kill people like that. So, he is a boss fight and James has 2 lives on his conscience, which is why, at the end of the game, you fight 2 Pyramid Heads. Well, it's more like you wait out until they end themselves, as you can't consciously defeat guilt, just wait it out. Then we have Maria, a woman who seems to be just like Mary, but much more forward, and she's something made by the town itself for James. An out, a fresh start, a way to deny reality and have a way to find Mary in Silent Hill and take her back home, to the same result, as her ending involves her coughing a lot as they leave the town. And even before that, James has to watch her die over and over again by the hand of the personification of his guilt. I wonder if Team Silent ever stopped and thought, wait, is this too on the nose? Will the player figure out the twist too early? If they did, I'm glad they didn't decide to back down. And then we have Angela. Oh Lord, Angela. A young girl sexually abused by her father, told by her own mother that she probably deserved it, she eventually retaliated and killed her abuser in his bed and fled. In one of the most striking scenes in the game, you see her lying on the floor, staring at the blade that she used to take a life with clear implications she wants to do it to herself, with James talking her out of it as he is reflected in the wall white mirror behind her. And at the end of the game, it repeats. But James is powerless to stop her from walking into the blazing inferno that is her version of Silent Hill. Because, well, yeah, you knew her for less than a day, and nothing you say about how taking your own life is unthinkable is said with any conviction, James. How can you help someone if you can't even help yourself? By the way, that knife's gameplay purpose? Driving James further down the path to the suicide ending. That's all it does. Fucking grim. All of these are a spin on the same sense of guilt. Taking a life with a very good reason behind it. Okay, the dog didn't deserve it, but its owner kinda did. There's no suspension of disbelief needed to try and find examples of such trauma in our world. It's probably happening to someone right now, as horrifying as it is. Death is kind of a constant. It is inevitable, both for ourselves and those close to us. And we need to process grief somehow, and stories that deal with the passing of a loved one are a dime a dozen. But suffering is not universal, neither is guilt. And Mary's last moments are treated with horrifying complexity. She wants to be left alone, but she wants James to stay by her side. She wants to end it, but she wants to keep on living. She views herself as a horrible monster physically, but still wants to be loved. And I don't know how I would act if this was the state of someone I loved. I don't know what I would want from them if it was me who would be in Mary's position. And I don't know for how long I could endure being on either side of it without at least a single thought of how irritating the situation is, as much as I would beat myself over it the second it appeared. And that is terrifying. The most terrifying thought of my life induced by a piece of fiction, on par with the final dream from Disco Elysium. And that is what makes Silent Hill 2 an enduring masterpiece of horror fiction. And I'm not equipped nor qualified to even begin talking about Angela's situation and her sense of guilt, so I won't. The most I can relate to is James's helplessness. And just like James, I'm helpless to touch on this facet of the story in any meaningful way. Well, we need to end on some common note, so let's get back to people who avoided spoilers. Lucky bastards. Now that everyone is gathered here, and I already said my piece on both how you should play Silent Hill 2 and why I think it's a masterpiece, hot take I know. What else is there to say? Well, I guess I should put some sort of thesis statement at the end here. Snapping your fingers is a seemingly easy action, you can do it just like that. But behind this literal snap-second moment, there is so much more going on. Nerves sending the signal to your muscles, them contracting, your middle finger hitting the palm at the right velocity and angle to produce this exact sound. Silent Hill 2 is very much the same. It's a tale so simple as to be widely relatable, but it's the vast amount of unseen detailed work that make it work so much stronger than if it was just a 2-sentence horror post on Reddit. Character and monster designs, level designs, the confused voice acting, the events unfolding in the specific order, the 3 available endings all being perfectly reasonable on some level. And there's so many works of psychological horror that miss some of those marks. Actually, scratch that, I think I have a very hard time calling anything else a psychological horror. Like, I googled the term right at this point of the script and I was baffled by several recommendations. The Shining? Psycho? Freaking Fear? Come on, these are all fantastic works in their respective media, but I never felt like the horror in them came from acquiring knowledge about the human psyche. If I were to call anything else a psychological horror, I guess that would be something like Satoshi Kon's Perfect Blue, because of how perfectly that man screws with the scene transitions and pacing to make you question how good is your grip on the barrier between fact and fiction. Oh, and Pathologic for making you question your own moral backbone through gameplay limitations. I really don't know how else to finish this video except by shilling 2 other perfect works of fiction. I'm sorry, please don't be mean to me on my birthday. Okay, I ran out of bits, so this is the end of the video. Next topic will probably be something to be worked on quick and dirty because man am I short on free time until the end of July. As usual, lots of love for all my Patreon supporters, now visible on the screen. They generously finance me pouring my soul in all those videos like I'm in therapy. See you in June. Cheers.